Thanks to recent advancements in artificial intelligence, more jobs are being created and changed by innovation. As AI continues to evolve, we need to rethink our approach to worker retraining and reskilling. Which policies will enable the benefits of AI to flourish while addressing legitimate workforce concerns? I'm proud to welcome our panel of experts who will discuss the developments in robotics and AI, its impact on our workforce, and what policymakers need to know about the future of work. So please join me in welcoming Tom Ward, Charlie Muirhead, Kate Sheeran, and the awesome Michael Petricone.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being here. Wow, a full house for the last panel of the day. How cool is that? Thank you. Okay, so we've had a lot of great discussions today, but I think this one is going to be especially interesting because intelligent machines enabled by ubiquitous sensors and broadband connectivity and large data sets are poised to be the transformative innovation of our era. Now, at CES, how many of you were at CES, by the way? Great, good. And everybody else, please come. At CES, you couldn't miss how all these examples of how AI will enhance your interactions with your car, your healthcare provider, even your refrigerator. Meanwhile, in DC, policymakers are grappling with the economic and societal implications of these new technologies. And here today, we have a phenomenal expert panel to discuss what AI means for our future, both as a nation and as entrepreneurs and as citizens. So let me start with Tom Ward. He is the Vice President of Digital Operations, e-commerce and online grocery at Walmart. And Walmart, as you know, is an iconic American brand with 2.3 million associates, 5,000 stores in the US alone, and an exceedingly complex mix of technologies. Next to him is Charlie Muirhead. He is the founder and CEO of Cognition X. And they're a group of AI thought leaders described as the Ghostbusters helpline for everything AI. I like that. Their 22-person team are on call to help membership of their 7,000 executives, policymakers, and startups understand and navigate our algorithmic future. They also have a terrific newsletter. I spend most of my time trying to unsubscribe from newsletters, but you should subscribe to Charlie's because it's really good. And finally, Charlie's brother has a band playing multiple shows at South by. What's the band?
Ranch Coast.
Ranch Coast. So go see them. They're good. Are they good?
They're awesome.
Great. And then we have Kate Sheeran next to me, the Senior Public Policy Analyst at Google. If you think about it, Google's mission to organize the world's information, make it universally accessible and useful, is tailor-made for AI as a key enabling technology. And as part of Google's government relations team, it is her job to inform policymakers about AI and our changing American workforce. Very important job. So let's start. AI is a term you hear tossed around a lot. It's in the newspapers, it's at South by, it's in a variety of contexts. What does AI really mean? And let's start with Kate.
So in the most general sense, I mean, there's no one definition for artificial intelligence, but in the most general sense, it's about making products that appear smart, making machines that appear smart. It's a kind of broad suite of different types of techniques that have been kind of built over the last 50 years. You've probably heard machine learning. That's kind of where our focus is at Google. And machine learning specifically is about having a system learn from patterns in data rather than coding hard and specific rules. And so I'll turn over to Charlie, who's actually building products with AI. I'm on the policy side, but I like to say it's really just an engineering technique. It's not some scary science fiction, and it's actually, you are all probably interacting with artificial intelligence every day.
Can I ask a question? Could you put your hand up if you think you understand what AI does? Okay. It's always helpful to get a sense of that. So we think of it really in two buckets. What people refer to as general intelligence and sometimes as superintelligence versus narrow AI. And it's important to delineate those two things. There's a lot of press that talks about robots that be able to think for themselves and do things and potentially take over this planet. That is still very much science fiction. If you talk to the best researchers at Google and lots of other places, nobody actually knows how many problems we're going to have to solve to build something like that, if ever. And there's this kind of, people talk about the singularity and a consensus date at 2041. Nobody actually knows if that date is real at all. But there's a lot of worthy research going into what that looks like and what precautions we need to take. But in the short term, what AI means is what some people call narrow AI, and that's ultimately an engineering technique to automate something based on patterns, and in some cases continuously improve it. But those AIs tend to do one thing extremely well. And if you take an AI that knows how to play chess and give it a different game to play, it can't play it at all. But the interesting thing is AIs today that are narrow can do many things, individual things, better than we can. And by bolting those things together, you can create human-like experiences, like a series of narrow AIs that know how to drive a car. So it's a confusing space. AI is used for all of those different domains. But general AI and super intelligence, still science fiction. The narrow AI very much here and affecting our lives every single day. And it kind of invisibly is operating in many, many, many different applications already.
Great. Tom, do you want to add?
I'm glad I'm going last, right?
Yes.
You guys did all the complex stuff, but I think AI for us is about accelerating decision making. So we have a whole ton of associates within our business that are empowered to make a bunch of decisions, and we can help them make those decisions a lot faster if we can leverage the ton of information that we've got as a business and we can present it in a really effective way. So I think, like Charlie said, you know, the narrow AI side of things for Walmart is proving really effective in a number of ways. I think the broader application can accelerate that even further. And as we think about how we're going to use robotics in the future in our business and how we're going to enable our workforce to do a better job of serving customers, AI is going to play a huge part for us.
So Kate, at CES, Google had a really terrific exhibit that showed how AI was going to impact your life basically from when you got up in the morning. Could you give us some of those examples?
Yeah, so I think the way that I think about AI is that it is finding better, smarter solutions to your everyday problems. And that's what that exhibit was like at CES. And at Google, we've kind of used it across a lot of our products, like everything from user protections, building better like spam and malware filters, to making our products more accessible. So YouTube used it to caption over 1 billion videos in 10 languages. And so for like the 300 million plus deaf and hard of hearing folks now, they have access to those videos on YouTube in a new way. You will also hear about the big things that people are doing with AI, the things that are tackling some of our like greatest challenges around the environment, around transportation. Recently, NASA used AI to find a whole new planet and a whole new planet system. So these things are kind of happening both on your phones every day, but also kind of in this larger research space as well.
Great. And Tom, tell us a little bit about how Walmart is using machine learning to enhance the online shop or enhance the shopping experience.
Yeah, so loads of ways. So I think when you interact with Walmart online, our overarching mission is to be very consistent to our customers. So we want to provide as many people possible access to low price products or the best product that they need to solve whatever problem it is they've got, whether it's grocery or whether it's a general merchandise. So we have two websites. We have an online grocery website and we have walmart.com. That's the huge tail of assortment. And AI is going to help us really assort that to be personalized to the person that's using the website at that time. So from a grocery perspective, we're really ramping this aggressively right now. We announced recently we're going to double our footprint. So we'll be in over 2,000 of our US locations this year. And as we present access to that information, to those assortment choices to more customers, we want to make sure it's the most relevant assortment to them at that time. So whether they're in the Northeast recently, and it's not, sunny and beautiful, 70 degrees outside, and then the snow's coming down, we need to make sure that when our customers sign on, we present them with a helpful assortment that's useful to solve the problem they've got at that moment in time, and then get that product to them as quickly and as efficiently as we possibly can. And that might be different at the same time across a different part of the United States. So we're going to use the technology to really empower personalization for customers as they need it.
Right, so now Walmart's an interesting company, right? Because you have a lot of brick and mortar stores and a very robust online presence. How do you use AI to create synergies between those experiences?
Yeah, I think our physical footprint is going to be hugely beneficial to us as we go into the kind of omni-channel environment. So we see it as a kind of relationship, an omni-channel relationship, where we're gonna create outsized value by leveraging these assets. We have a ton of forward deployed inventory which lives in our stores. You know, what you'd hear referred to as the kind of head of the assortment in terms of online products. So 100,000-ish SKUs at any one time lives in one of our super centers, and we know our super centers are normally within about 10 miles of about 90% of the US population. So when you couple that with our online presence, you can form a really strong ecosystem for the customer, and you can make it really relevant to them. So as you think about when you go online to buy a product, we offer you a number of choices, right? You might be able to ship it to your home, which we know is the traditional online proposition. But it might not be as convenient for it to be shipped to your home. You might want it that same day. You might want to pick it up from the local store, and that might not be the store you live near, that might be the store you work near, or it might be the store you happen to be near at the time. And if you opt for one of those options, we want the site to be able to say, hey, Tom, here's the quickest way you can get hold of that product. And then when you walk into the store, we've been experimenting with our pickup towers. And if you haven't seen one of these, you should check it out. So it's a giant orange tower that we sourced about a year ago now. 160 stores have these in them, and there'll be about 500 stores by the end of the year at least. And this takes a lot of friction out for our customer. So it allows them to walk in the door, scan the QR code, and have that product dispensed much like a vending machine in about 15 seconds, and they can get about their way. So what the site can do and the brick and mortar business can do is decide what's the best way for a customer to get the product they want as fast as they want in however way they want.
So the checkout process is in any retail experience is the bottleneck, right? So you're saying AI can alleviate that.
I think it can present the relevant options that the customer needs, because what's interesting about delivering things to the home is that might not always be the most convenient way to receive them. What we want to do to our customers is say, hey, we can deliver it if you wish. We can send it to a location that you choose, or we can let you come in store and pick it. And if the assortment sits inside the store, we want the website to be able to present that option to our customer, which means they can get a product even faster than they expected.
So one very exciting area of conversation is how AI can be used to overcome just these massive societal challenges that we've been working on for a long time. In DC, there's a congressman named Will Hurd who's holding hearings exploring how AI can enhance delivery of government services. And it's really exciting what AI can potentially do. Charlie, can you give us some examples in that area?
Sure. Well, the UK just made a huge step forward and for the first time set up an office of AI and brought two departments together. I think they signed off about 75 million in funding, which has gone across research groups. And for the first time, there's going to be a minister for AI, which is pretty exciting. So they're taking it very seriously. And I think if you look on the global stage, the US was the number one investor in AI research and development, followed by China, followed by the UK, and that's actually switched around for the first time. And so while the 75 million is a step in the right direction, certainly there's lots more to come if everybody's going to keep up.
Mm-hmm. Kay, do you have any thoughts about AI and kind of larger social issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the areas that we've seen a lot of amazing things happen in is the healthcare and medical space. And I think since our theme is workforce and AI, I think it's a really good example of how like the combination of doctors and AI can be something that's really powerful. It's not that AI is replacing doctors. They're actually using it to like be more efficient, be more accurate in diagnosis. So we've seen it in diabetic retinopathy, which is really hard to diagnose. We've seen stuff in the cancer space. And I think there's a lot of opportunity in the medical field for extensive research using AI, and also to free up doctors to be able to spend more time with patients rather than spending time, looking at images and kind of reviewing information on the back end.
Charlie, anything you want to add? Or David?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a huge amount of discussion about this question of job reductions, and one of our former Secretary of State in the UK was telling me a story the other day that he bought the first mainframe in the UK and had to let thousands and thousands of people go when that happened. But more jobs were created. He also bought the first PCs in the UK, and that all happened again. And he's in his 80s. And he looks at this and kind of goes, he has complete faith that this is a cycle that we're going to see happen again. And one of his observations was way back when he was a kid, he had 3 jobs, he worked 7 days a week, and there was no cafes and restaurants or anything else. And he feels that obviously there are going to be people that are displaced, but we're going to move to a model where it's more about skills than jobs. You have much more fluid and liquid workforces, and there'll be this requirement to do continuous learning. So I think that's a much more positive way of thinking about it. He calls that job liberation rather than job displacement. But I think a lot of people need to look into this, because if you ask most governments how much modeling and research has actually been done on the impact of AI, the answer is close to none in the actual workforce. And it's a very, very complex problem to think through.
Now, in terms of how you see the workforce changing, just all of you, our CEO, Gary Shapiro, was on a really interesting panel on the workforce and robotics and AI. And somebody on that panel said that the jobs that are going to be mostly impacted by AI and robots are the ones that are dirty, dangerous, and dull. Now, do you see that, or is it going to be more extensive?
I think from Walmart's perspective, we want to be people-led and tech-enabled. And so where we see technology playing a part is, how do you take some of the mundane tasks out of the hands of our associates and free them up to spend more time serving customers, which is essentially what they're there to do. So we're pretty excited about what technology is going to mean for us. And as we look across our business, there are roles that are definitely changing through technology. 3 years ago, we'd have seen a workforce carry a whole bunch of paper around, and we'd have seen them back and forth and generate reports just to be able to interpret, process in their business or information that they need. Whereas you don't really see that anymore. We've been on a journey in the last couple of years where we've given our store managers tablets, we've developed in-house applications that synthesize information, and have kind of shifted the skill from interpretation to action. And I think that's what we'll continue to see. We opened a series of academies across the US over the last couple of years, 200 sites, which are a real-life Walmart store serving customers and kind of a school bolted on the side. And when we did that, we made a decision to go 100% paperless. And if you think of the diversity of our workforce, people weren't used to using tablets necessarily. They weren't used to using virtual reality, which we've rolled out. But people have adopted really quickly, and they've engaged and embraced technology. And what they found it's done is it's accelerated their curve to understanding, how to be more relevant in the future workplace. So I'm pretty confident that we'll continue to build on those.
Yeah, Michael, I agree. I think advances in technology have always generally led to better, safer, more fulfilling jobs, and I don't see why AI would be any different. That being said, jobs are really tied to identity and someone's idea of who they are, and so we can't just dismiss concerns about jobs shifting and changing, and we have to think carefully about what it's going to mean for people in the future.
So it sounds like, as has been historically typical of all new disruptive technologies, that some jobs will be eliminated and other jobs created. But what's also clear is that in order to take advantage of these new jobs, that today's employees are going to need a whole set of skills, a whole set of different skills. What skills, Charlie, are you, in talking with your members, what skills do they need? And are they able to find them in order to have employees that succeed in an AI-dominated world?
It's a great question, and we get it all the time, mostly from friends of people who come to actually our events, and they're thinking about their children. What subject should my children study? I think until recently, people would say, go and learn how to code. One of our community members runs a business that basically worked out how to do DNA sequencing for just a few dollars. And they have this incredibly complicated chemistry they do to do that, and it's a huge breakthrough. And one of the things they discovered is they produced a vast amount of data, and they didn't really know what to do with it. So they got some machine learning engineers, and they got these guys to work out how to calibrate the system so that they could improve the way they did the DNA sequencing. So this is like a super highly skilled thing to do. It's programming of digital signal processors. And actually, they've just eliminated that team. By applying AI to it. So the kind of the superficial answer is often, go and learn how to code, and that's going to protect you. Actually, in some ways, some of the most complex maths is going to be one of the first areas that can really get, through narrow AI, automated. So we have people going much more into learning history and psychology and philosophy and kind of the human sciences rather than going necessarily into the technical and STEM subjects.
So that's interesting and somewhat counterintuitive from a lot of our discussions. So, but what you're saying is that essentially those soft skills, right? The history that I would imagine like social and emotional intelligence are the things that may in fact be the most difficult to automate.
Well, if you think about, what makes human intelligence human and the incredible way our brain works, we're so far away from putting that into machine learning at the moment, and most scientists will acknowledge that. We can do one thing repetitively extremely well. So human problem-solving abilities, intuition, the sense of self, consciousness, these are all things that aren't going to happen anytime soon. So if you think about educating yourself through both studying history and also how we approach those problems, problem-solving itself, multi-dimensional problem-solving, a fantastic skill. That's going to be around for a while.
So Kate, Google recently announced a $1 billion initiative for jobs and technology training, including 1 million hours volunteered by Google employees, which is pretty cool. So what skills are you trying to teach? What are going to be the necessary skills to succeed?
Yeah, I think one is lifelong learning. I think sometimes we kind of like, oh, check the box, like we had our education, now we're moving on, we're in the workforce. And I think increasingly as jobs are changing and people are adapting and taking different types of jobs over their lifetime, there needs to be this shift to lifelong learning. Through Grow with Google, the program that Michael just mentioned, we're doing things around digital skills. So just the basics around digital literacy, of course work in computer science, but then also to Charlie's point, soft skills. So soft skills that are gonna make an employer feel like that candidate is gonna be a great employee and can change as the jobs change, as the company changes over time. So our work in the education space is kind of covering all of those areas, and I think we're starting to see more and more really cool, innovative programs in the education space, and I think there's probably some interesting policy complements to them too.
Yeah, so Grow with Google is it's an online training program that offers professional certificates. Are we seeing kind of a paradigm shift here in education where it used to be that your degree was important? If you went to a really good school, you had that degree, and that was your certificate of competence. But now it's less about degrees and more about specific credentials. Is that accurate? It's what you can do?
It is what you can do. I think there is a gap right now, and there's a lot of certification and credentialing programs kind of popping up. But I don't think that we have like a good view right now of whether those are, one, going to be sustainable, two, are going to be meaningful to employers in the future. So we have an IT certification that we're working on with Coursera, and that stemmed out of a Google program because we were having a really hard time hiring IT support professionals. And so then we had our own training program that brought people to Google and gave them a job and gave them training in the IT support area, which is a really high growth job area. But then we figured that other companies are probably having the exact same challenge. So we worked with Coursera to make that curriculum public so that people can take it and get a credential. And I think the really interesting part of that program is that once you complete it, you can choose to share your information with employers who are looking to hire IT support professionals. And so it is really making this connection between education, skill building over time, and then directing that into a job at the end.
So AI it's the challenge and also the solution simultaneously. Yep. So Tom, you were talking about your Walmart academies. When you're hiring your associates, are you finding the people, are schools today producing employees with the kind of skills that you need?
Yeah, I think we've got a really diverse population that go through the academies. And what was interesting when we set them up, they're just 2 years old now, just about open across the nationwide. The people we hire to work in the academy that train our workforce are not teachers. They were great associates. They were good at the roles that they were in, and they're learning how to help teach other associates to be great at their roles. And we don't kind of take people in at the very ground level and then work them through. But we went through a huge leveling exercise. So we decided when there was an investment made to put more department managers, for example, back into our business, we were taking people in that might have been working for Walmart for 25 years and had never been through a formal training program or had never left the work environment they worked in, gone down the road to an academy and spent a couple of weeks being trained through technology. And it's been really interesting because people have adapted to it really well and taken on the information. And when we looked at different ways as to how might you convey information to a group of folks that may not have spent a whole lot of time in education previously, that's where virtual reality really came to light to us, because it's really memorable. And the tech community, obviously, probably a lot of you guys are familiar with it, and if you walk around the convention center, it seems like pretty much every corner someone's got a headset on right now. But that's not necessarily the case across the vast majority of areas that we work in. And so every piece of training you take somebody through prepares them for a set of skills, and it's highly memorable through the format that they kind of receive it in. So what I'd like to think we're doing through the academies is building a muscle for our workforce to come somewhere to learn new skills and then to work in new areas of the business that simply didn't exist. So my team in e-commerce in the field, we have a personal shopper position that's a brand new job to Walmart the last couple of years, and it is exactly what it sounds. They're the people who pick the groceries for our online grocery pickup and delivery service. Well, that was a new role. That didn't exist in physical retail. And so as we train those people, we're preparing them for a workforce for jobs that will be there in the future that might not have existed in traditional retail in the past.
Yeah, this is clearly a huge issue for the tech industry and CTA, and we just hired our first vice president of U.S. jobs to talk to our members and coordinate these programs, because there are a lot of very innovative things going on in various places, but it's not happening uniformly, and we need. Do you think we need more of a national strategy?
I think it's definitely going to help. I think as we, certainly as we've spoken about, and we've spoken at quite length around academies and also our Pathways program, which is our in-store, very entry-level program. We've had a lot of interest from other parties, other companies about what it is that we're doing and how we're developing our hourly and management workforce. So I think a focus in that space for the future is definitely something that's going to be helpful.
So just another interesting aspect is how AI is going to amplify human ingenuity, and how organizations can use AI to both improve their employees and their bottom line. And David, you had a great anecdote about HR and hiring and how AI can make the hiring process more efficient.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the workforce, it's how we actually manage people effectively. One area we look at is HR and AI, and there are 28 different use cases in an HR department, roughly, across the life cycle. And we found over 350 different AI companies addressing those 28 different parts of the life cycle. And so this is a very active space. And they range from things like candidate sourcing to attrition analysis, rewards optimization, all kinds of things, workforce management. And there's some companies that have really run ahead very fast. Unilever is a great example where they had a recruiting process for graduates that touched nearly a million applicants every year. You imagine sifting through 1 million CVs, it's not fun. And it was for about 1,000 roles. And it used to take 6 months to go through that process, and they had an army of people doing that. And at the end of the 6-month process, you finally found out whether you were going to get this graduate job or not. And so a lady called Mel G. Key started a program. She's a bit of a renegade internally. And she picked 3 vendors, one called HireView, which does automated video interviewing, another one called Pymetrics, which does aptitude testing. And they rolled out a video interview and kind of gamified test across those 1 million people instead. And what they've done is reduced, using those pieces of machine learning, that process from 6 months to 2 weeks. And so now, the first thing is the graduates love it, because there's nothing worse than waiting to find out whether you got a job for 6 months. But not only is it much more efficient, they ended up with a much more diverse pool of people they offered jobs to. Bizarrely, through the process, they discovered a lot of people that applied and then didn't take up the opportunity were because they couldn't afford to get a flight and a hotel booked in advance of knowing they'd got the job. So interesting things like that came out of the process. And then, of course, you say, what happened to the people that used to screen all the interviews, right, which were recruiters? And those people all got deployed to a much higher value-add part of the process, which was onboarding the different graduates and getting them settled into their roles and making sure they're happy. So, a great application of AI being used by the HR department to improve the way you find the best talent, improving diversity, and ultimately making the whole process a little bit more enjoyable for candidates.
And Tom or Kate, are you also using HR in your hiring decisions, and is it becoming easier?
Yeah, so I mean, if we think about hiring at the hourly level for a store associate, and for the management team that we have in our stores, there's a huge breadth of work that you can do at Walmart. So we're trying to think through how do you make that as appealing as possible, and then once you get that workforce in, a bit to what Charlie was saying, then it's about how do you retain these people that can grow a fantastic career through the business. So we have a huge proportion of our hourly associates started out as hourly associates and then graduated through to be management. I started my career as department manager in Asda in the UK business, for example. So there's a ton of opportunity. I think what we're trying to do is meet our associates where they need us to in terms of what training do we provide and what's the right balance. Because it might not all be lent towards academic or computer-based learning. We're trying to say, what's the right balance between ensuring that people are safe and compliant, but if they need to learn on the sales floor, that we build that kind of relationship. And then the academy, like I said before, is how do you leverage the technology? And it's very hands-on. It's actually 75% sales floor, and then the rest of the time that they spend in the classroom using the tech that we've put in. And we found it's made it much more relevant, and we've seen better retention rates for hourly and more successful managers as they've graduated over the last 2 years.
That's interesting because the next step for a lot of the clients that have used, it's quite a common use case to deal with this very high volume of applicants to graduate roles. But the next use case is actually internally to, based on skills and aptitude, allow people to move around the organization and almost like an internal gig economy, have a much more fluid workforce. And to provide the programs for people to upskill in a particular area where they have high potential and high aptitude for a job, but they might be missing some of the skills required. It's interesting, when you were mentioning IT as a key requirement, that's a great example where it's a problem-solving job. I mean, anybody who's tried to fix any IT these days knows that it's not really about coding.
Yeah.
And I think, opportunities like that will continue. Bizarrely, in the UK, one of the most common examples of a job that won't get AI'd is plumbing. Because everybody's plumbing environment's different.
Right.
So it's kind of across the board. But I think matchmaking people based on their aptitude and the skills they've got and their personal traits rather than on their academic background and whether they had a degree from somewhere is definitely the direction we're heading in.
But does that also mean that we need to figure out a way to destigmatize vocational education, right? Because we're always going to need plumbers.
Yeah, I mean, experience-based learning, vocational education, I think these are all fantastic initiatives, and it's hard to move people away from that traditional credential of a university qualification, but it is happening. I mean, in Germany, getting an apprenticeship at one of the top German companies is seen as good, if not better, than getting a degree from one of the top universities.
Right.
Probably doesn't need to be binary either, right? You can develop, so we're going to give university credits to our associates as they move through the academy. It's something we're trying to figure out. How do you sort of couple these worlds together and find people that the situation they're in and they're being successful within that space, and if there's credentials that can help them be more successful in future years that are relevant outside of Walmart, then we should celebrate that.
So you give your own credential system internally for that?
Right.
Yeah, I think there's also a lot of interesting work to be done in the credentialing system that you have at Walmart. What does that mean for another company if that employee leaves and wants to go somewhere else? Like, can they transfer those skills? Is that meaningful to another company? And I think there's a lot of discussion about what that should look like or could look like, and I think that's a really interesting area coming up.
That's really interesting. There's actually a use case, which is a public one, so I can share it, of Pymetrics doing this aptitude test for Unilever, the candidate not making it Unilever, but ticking a box to say they were happy to be referred on to another Pymetrics customer, and they got a job at Accenture as a result.
So we've been talking a lot about the positive aspects of AI, but Elon Musk was here yesterday. You know where this is going. Elon Musk was here yesterday, and his vision of the future makes Black Mirror seem like a sunny rom-com. He said, the danger of AI is much greater than the danger of nuclear warheads, by a lot. Mark my words, AI is far more dangerous than nukes. So these kind of predictions about new technologies, apocalyptic predictions, are like, they're not new, right? I mean, they've been around since Ned Ludd was encouraging people to take down the weaving machines. But is something different this time, or is this just tech hysteria?
You ask
Anybody who wants to respond to Elon?
I think there's no question that the potential of the systems we're building now is extraordinary, and with the wrong goal and in the wrong hands, terrible things could happen. On the flip side, you look at the number of deaths in road traffic accidents, and it's off the charts. Somebody gave me the horrific example that we get upset when one airplane goes down because of a failure, but it's the equivalent if you think of deaths on the road as a 747 going down every single day. So there are incredibly positive things. On the flip side scenario, going back to Elon's point, you don't need much of an imagination to think about drones getting out of control and being used for all kinds of weaponized scenarios, and AI-controlled weapons is something there's been a big campaign pushing against. The challenge that we see in all of these different use cases, whether it's in China, in America, in Europe, is who's going to regulate anything like this and hold back the innovation and the advance, and put potentially their state at a global economic disadvantage. And that's a massive thing. So if we all did it simultaneously, maybe there's a way through that. But how do you do that? One, get the regulation right, which is incredibly hard. And secondly, it's a pretty tough thing for any individual state to go and do.
I generally think that focusing on either the extremely pessimistic view of AI or the extremely sunny view is not super productive. But I do think that there is a different level of conversation around AI, and so many panels just like this one talking about these issues around ethics, around what it should look like in the future, what are the responsibilities of companies who are building these tools. And I think that conversation is robust, and it's a really good and important one to be having.
So interestingly, Charlie, what you were saying, that Elon in the very same speech talked about how Tesla has brought his automobile safety or deaths down by 45%, and the next version of his autonomous or his self-driving system is going to be even better and save even more people. So it's kind of a mixed message. But that said, if we were going to foreclose the Elon Musk scenario, if we were going to take it seriously, and surely that's not the outcome we want, what do we have to bear in mind? What should we do?
I think it's really hard, because the question is there a real opt-out, whether it's at a state level or even as an individual, right? I mean, we were just talking about AI being used in HR, and people talk about an opt-out. Could you actually opt out of that? What if your future career is now being dictated by the way the system's monitoring you for good reasons, your aptitude, your skills, your credentials, your one, and so on? And so we're already going down this path. I think your point a second ago about ethics, I mean, there's a huge number of initiatives around responsible deployment. That's a massive issue, and it's great that it's getting lots of airtime. But I think, ultimately the question, and Elon actually calls for regulation. He says, it should be regulated. Lots of people have got different ideas as to what that should be. The only credible discussion I've really heard is regulating privacy further. We're about to have GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, introduced in the UK in May.
Yes.
It's a massive issue. It means you have to be able to explain how a decision was made, which means a lot of deep learning algorithms are going to have a real problem. In fact, you won't be able to use them. And there's a whole bunch of other similar protections that are also there. But going the next step on that and enabling us all to be in control of our own data and how it's used is one potential way forward that you could actually opt out. But still, you wonder whether there'll be a true opt-out option.
Right, and I don't want to get on a GDPR tangent, because that would be another panel. But could you just briefly explain what it is, and then briefly explain what you believe the reaction is going to be, or the impact is going to be on UK businesses?
Yeah, it's Europe. It's European-wide. Right. It's European-wide. I think it's a very important thing. It essentially means you need permission to keep and store somebody's data, their personal data. And that sounds like an obvious thing, but it's actually not the case in a lot of businesses today. And the second thing is that if you are in breach of that, I think it's 4% of your annual revenues is the penalty, which I think for any organization is pretty punitive. In terms of what it means for business, I think it's a very good thing. I think it's great that in Europe that we're going to have that kind of regulation in place. One of the things you've seen popping up around, again, it's another panel, the whole blockchain discussion, but there are a lot of people trying to build data exchanges where you can have policy control over your own personal data and decide which service can access it and which can't. And some people really think that level of control is the equivalent of or fundamental to our human rights in the future, something that some countries don't actually support at all. So GDPR may not be the full step to getting there.
Right.
And as those exchanges become viable and live, there may be pressure from consumers to say, actually, no online service can exist unless it ties into one of those exchanges and gives you that level of control.
Right. Okay, I think we're going to have a whole GDPR and privacy panel next year. But for now, let's move on with AI. So when you were talking about the whole AI's role in hiring, it just made you think about the algorithms and how they work and the larger issues of AI and fairness, right? So AI, it runs on the data we give it. So we create it, and it reflects society, and basically AI is us, for better or worse. And that means that AI algorithms are predominantly written by men, it's a fact, predominantly white men. You have these issues where, for example, some facial recognition programs have problems recognizing non-white faces just because there aren't a lot of data sets. There aren't as many data sets with people of color. What do we need to do to make sure that automation is inclusive and fair for the future? Kate, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think you're right. Building an inclusive machine learning algorithm is the only way that this is going to work. And I think actually this is I see it as very similar as for all the types of technology we're building at Google. Unless our workforce is reflecting the world around us truly around diversity and inclusion, our products are not going to be good. And so we've been really investing a lot in this space. We look across all of our hiring and our workforce, and the goal is that if our workforce is diverse and inclusive, then that will be reflected in our products.
Tom or Charlie?
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned a couple of times, diversity and inclusion is hugely important at Walmart, and because of where we're located, nationwide in all areas, not just coast to, in the the tech centers of the US. Walmart customer and Walmart associate reflects the communities in which they operate, and so by its nature, we're a diverse business. I think it's definitely something to keep an eye out for, and it's to your point, right? Is the machine learning is using the data that's provided, and if there's bias in the data, then clearly there's bias in the AI. I think for us right now, most of the things that we're using AI for are to accelerate decisions based on data around pick path routing or whether it's about which store to visit in the morning. If we use our regional managers, we're working on a tool right now that says, given the area that they have to look after, what's the most efficient use of their time? But that AI, that information, that output is based on a set of predetermined things that we've agreed upon as a business to say, we value this over that right now in terms of metrics. So I think we'll continue to focus on diversity, but I think it's going to be something that will challenge everybody over the coming years.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's a huge issue. I don't want to name and shame anyone, but there are multiple examples that we deal with in the UK and Met where it is purely white male development teams on quite advanced pieces of AI. And so that's the bad news, but they're all very aware of it and that they're trying to do something about improving it. Just to give some positive news, while UCL, which is one of the top universities in Europe, has a computer science course, it is still male dominated. But they introduced a one-year master's course in data and analytics machine learning, which has been incredibly popular, and it's pretty much 50-50. And so people are coming into that subject from lots of other subjects. So if you go back to our conversation of how automated is code writing going to be in the future, the answer is very. They call it one finger programming. It's going to be a lot of that. But actually thinking about how to interpret the data and what to do with it and writing effectively pseudocode. Right. That gets automatically implemented, that's looking like it's more like 50-50, which is awesome. The other little bit of good news, and it's Jay Russo at eBay. She has about 50 people in her AI team in Europe, and every single one is from a different background, and there's 12 different languages. And her philosophy is leave nobody behind and make sure that the experience on eBay is caters for every single ethnic and country origin you can imagine. So that's pretty cool.
Cool. Okay, so we're going to ask one more question, and then we're going to go to the audience for questions, because I'm sure you have a bunch. So think of your questions, and we are going to get to that in about 5 minutes. But first, I want to talk about the international landscape a little bit. So China has just committed $30 billion, is it 30 billion? $30 billion to being the world's AI leader. China clearly sees this area as the strategic, important technology of the century, basically their equivalent of the Apollo 11 lunar mission. And in the United States, the White House has been engaged, working with agencies to promote uses of AI in national security and as a way of encouraging economic prosperity. Is there something, what as a country should we be doing to ensure that we are competitive in the future in AI? And how important is this really? Kate, do you want to start?
Sure. I think first, the government can do a lot to help people understand artificial intelligence. I do, before the first question out here is what is artificial intelligence? And I think there's a lot of work that can be done talking about this more, talking about the implications, talking about the real meanings. I think the government can also facilitate research into the barriers for implementation around AI, into the challenges there as well. I think the government can encourage responsible data sharing so that the data is available for these machines to be learning from. I think there's kind of a full range, and I think actually even within the U.S. government, where can AI be effective in making it more efficient, for example?
It's a hugely complicated topic. China not only has committed that amount of money, but it also has very different privacy laws, not to go back to a GDPR discussion, which means it has almost unfettered access for its leading AI researchers to personal data, which means they can train their algorithms much faster.
Wait, just explain why that's important.
Well, the time it takes to train any AI system, narrow AI, to do something well is based on how many examples you can show it, and then how much further data you have. And if you really want it to do smart stuff, you need this concept of reinforcement learning, where it can try something, see if it works, and if it doesn't, try something else. And if it does work, then further emphasize the thing that did work. And if you've got access to the equivalent of the Twitter fire hose, all Google searches, and so on, inside an organization, without the same privacy laws we have in America and Europe, then you can train your algorithms much more effectively. And so this is a real strategic advantage for companies in China. And there is a number of examples of that. In fact, there's entrepreneurs that have gone back from America and from Europe to China because they have greater access to the data. So it's not just the funding, it's also the privacy laws. Just going back to your original question, though, for our part, we're making available a free service which will enable people to look up and try and understand AI better. There need to be lots of initiatives like that. Wikipedia's made a huge difference. The internet and Google's made a huge difference. So making sure that there's democratic access to good information about AI, because one of the biggest issues is employees and all of us just being concerned because we don't understand it. The most common question we get at CognitionX is, I've heard the words AI and artificial intelligence, but I just don't know what it means.
I think I'd echo the same point these guys have made, which is just, the understanding piece is going to be huge, and you would hope that what is AI won't be a question that we'll ask in a few years' time. And that's definitely where we're leaning in, to your point then, Charlie, which is how do we, take a workforce in a traditional industry like retail and begin to modernize, as we become more of an omni-channel business. Terms like AI and what it's used for and how it's useful are going to become more and more apparent. And probably the amount of AI that our associates use they don't necessarily realize, whether it's in their home lives, personal lives, or at work. How do we be more purposeful about that approach? And there's going to be a ton of great ideas that we hear all the time, and applications for technology that will be useful to everyone that we should be able to tap into as people understand what do we mean by some of these terms.
Okay, so let's go to questions. And we have a microphone somewhere. And I'm going to ask you to put your hand in the air if you want to ask a question, and identify who you're with, and please phrase your question in the form of a question. And with that, do we have any hands? Oh, yes.
Hi, my name is Joe Rogers. I have an AI startup, which I won't describe. But how many AI development companies are actually addressing the potential loss, the displaced workers? Like, are they just coming up with whiz-bang IT or tech, and then whatever happens, happens, or is anybody actually taking the next step to try to help those people that doing the dumb, dangerous, dirty jobs?
It's a good question.
I don't know how many individual companies are doing things. There are a ton of programs out there. There are not enough. They're not scaled up enough across skill building, entrepreneurship, things about like updating the social safety nets. There's so much that we should be talking about now. And one of the things that I always say in any conversation about future of jobs and future of work is sometimes we're like, oh, in 20 years, this is what jobs are going to be looking like, and people will have to shift, but people have challenges in their jobs today, and so we need to start seeing more programs. We need to see more companies trying things, launching and iterating, sharing the learnings from the programs that they're launching also, I think is really important, but I agree, I think there's way more that can be done.
I mean, just to give a local example, AT&T announced $1 billion of investment into retraining and upskilling their employees. You know, there are some great examples where people publicly or not so publicly have announced that they want to continue investing in their workforce. You know, there are going to be some people who don't want to learn a new job or learn a new skill, and that's going to be challenging. If they're in a job where a number of the tasks that they do are going to be automated. And going back to Lord Young, who I mentioned earlier, you know, he oversaw the coal miners' strikes and all those changes in the UK under Margaret Thatcher. And he said there's some coal miners who just said, like, I just don't want to do any other job. I was happy mining coal. And so that's challenging. But for people who are prepared to learn and continue to evolve in the skills that they have, I think you're going to see a lot of progress, not least because AI is actually going to revolutionize the way we educate people. It already is. And both reduce dramatically the cost of learning new skills, making learning personalized to the individual rather than a classroom where it's one size fits all. Not to eliminate teachers, you'll still have teachers, but I think it's an interesting question, and there are lots of people making big investments.
Right, and the AI can make learning regionally specific too, right?
Absolutely.
To teach you the skills that are needed, like in your specific geographic area.
Completely personalized to you as an individual, and that's a very fast-moving area.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to repeat anything that I've already said, but you know, that we're just trying to get out in front of this change. So, as Walmart becomes an omnichannel, business more and more, how do you prepare the workforce now that have been used to working in a particular way for the way that we need them to work in the future? And I don't think it's an overnight change. It's a migration through skills and through processes. And like I said, you go into a store today, you won't see anyone carrying paper. You'll see everyone using this for all the information they need, and they're tools that simply didn't exist a couple of years ago. And we've moved, over 1 million people to work in that way in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and it's an important issue. I think we spend a lot of time talking about how we teach students and young people to thrive in the new economy, and that's important. But so is, what do you do with the 45-year-old person whose job is disrupted and goes away, and they have kids, and they need to learn new skills and have dignity and security, and that's very important. But as you were saying, as AI poses the challenge, it also poses the solution. Do we have any other questions? Yes, the woman in the green.
Hi, my name is Karen Bhatia, and I head our tech strategy at the New York City Economic Development Corporation. And I was wondering if you have any strategies or any models by which we can help foster access to cleansed data to help businesses that are in AI, especially startups across a variety of industries like finance, healthcare, and so on. Any good models you can recommend?
There's a question to cleanse the data?
Help get access to data for startups.
Yeah.
So, respecting privacy laws.
Yeah. It's actually, unless anybody else wants to jump on it, there's one of the investments by the government is in the concept of data trusts, recognizing that wherever there's data that's public data, where we all have a right to it, that it's readily available and easy to access so that startups can access it. There are also technologies, I'm just going to quote one UK company that I know offhand called Privitar, that try and build a layer that sits between the data in any AI company that makes it impossible to try and identify the personally identifiable information within the data set. So there's both technical solutions, but I think the data trust is a great way forward, and access to data for training data purposes is really, really, really important. So that's something that everybody should be trying to do.
Okay. Yes.
Hi there, my name is Tristan, if you can't tell by my sweatshirt. Yeah, networking. So my question...
It's awesome.
Yeah, I found out I was going a week ago. I was like, I need a personalized sweatshirt for myself. So question is actually around research based off Gen Pop's receptiveness to AI. You know, so we can see when we're targeted. We can see when things are personalized. And there is the word that's tossed around often, which is creepy. You know, oh, and I work at Cinemark, by the way, the movie theater, so hopefully everybody loves movies. So the question is do you have any research about people saying, you know what, this is okay and I'm good with it, or you know, not so much, because we can go and like bake AI into things that we do, but for all we know, people could go, you know what, you're a company that has robots serving drinks, or, you know, personalization, I'm not into that. Have you had any research around that?
About whether people find it creepy?
Well,
Yeah,
but you're asking, is there user consent to their data
Do it,
being
yeah, because we, you know,
implicit or explicit?
yeah, because if you bake AI into the process, whether it's personalization or something, people could be receptive, or you could get super big time backlash, you know, and people could say, you know, I'm not really down for that, and you're a company that's actually taken that approach. Are you finding that audiences are very, you know, are receptive to it, or?
I think to just go back to one of the things that we were saying earlier, I think there is really a gap in understanding of what AI is and how it's used and where it's used and what it is for people to kind of interact with it. I think we see these kind of big headlines about AI and robot apocalypse type thing, but what is the level of understanding, to your point, that people have about what it means? And I think there's so much more work that has to be done in explaining it.
I think as it relates to personalization, I think, you know, if you provide people access to things that they find really useful, I think people will celebrate that. I think it's when it comes to a point where it's not helpful or it's overwhelming, or to your point, you know, it's not well understood, that those sort of questions will arise. But I think the point for technology is it should help empower people. That's definitely what we want to do at Walmart.
Okay, we have time for one more super quick question. The woman in the blue, or the, no, who can I see? Okay, the person in the back. All right, two super quick questions. Can you both make them very quick? I can't choose.
Hey guys, my name is Mauricio Cohen, engineering at Johnson Space Center. Real quick curveball for you guys. Let me see, one of you guys said like it's about job liberation, not job displacement. So my question is universal basic income the answer? Does that have anything to do with AI?
I'm sorry, can you say that again? Universal basic
basic
income.
income.
Okay, all right, lightning round.
I think there is a lot of conversation about universal basic income that is important and good to have, but it's not the only silver bullet solution. There's so many other things that can be done around economic opportunity, starting now and not waiting for something down the road.
Okay, the last and final question.
Hi, Benji Decker from Mercer. We're the world's largest HR consulting company. We're looking at a lot of these issues, very interested. Anyone doing startups around it, we like talking to that. Anyway, there's a question for Kate about Boston Dynamics, if you're familiar with it. Word on the street is it was sold because the policy shop at Google was nervous that it was touching a little too close to home, about displacing human jobs. One, is that true? And then two, if so, how do you guys balance trying to push forward technology and moving forward cool new products while managing the implications for, the humans it impacts?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question, the first part, but to the second part about balancing innovation and also investing to make sure people have access to jobs, like good quality jobs, that's a priority for us at Google, and we've been doing kind of a lot of work across the company on it, from the policy side in Washington, where I work, from Google.org, who is investing in research into some of like the biggest challenges and opportunities around things like portable benefits, for example. And then also through Grow with Google, which is is what Michael mentioned earlier, which is actually like hands-on training opportunities for teachers, students, small businesses, entrepreneurs. And so I feel strongly that we can't dismiss how people feel about their jobs changing, and the company is looking for ways that we can help support people who are looking for new skills and looking for new jobs.
Okay, and that concludes our Innovation Policy Day 2018. I want to thank this panel. I want to thank all of our panelists. I want to thank you for spending your day with us at South by Southwest. There are all these amazing things happening at South by. You chose to be with us. I want to thank the amazing teams from CTA and Glen Echo Group that put on this great event. We have events like this and discuss disruptive innovation because they are key to our future as Americans and our economy. And today these discussions were smart and substantive and positive, and we are going to take that back to DC. Thank you so much.